When Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603, she left behind a strange, deliberate mystery. She had personally forbidden anyone from performing an autopsy on her body. To this day, nobody knows for certain exactly what killed one of England's most powerful monarchs. But we do know what she put on her face every single day, for decades. And we know exactly what that substance does to a human body over time. This is the history of face powder and the toxic paste that quietly poisoned generations of women who simply wanted to look pale and flawless. To understand how we got here, you need to understand what beautiful actually meant in Renaissance and early modern Europe. Pale, luminous skin wasn't just a personal preference, the way we might think of a beauty trend today. It was a direct, visible status symbol, readable at a glance across an entire room. If your skin was untouched by the sun, it meant you didn't labor outdoors like a peasant or a servant. It meant you were wealthy enough to stay indoors, protected, sheltered, and therefore valuable as a marriage prospect and a symbol of your family's standing. Achieving that look artificially became a genuine obsession among European nobility, spreading from Italy across France, England, and much of the continent, and the substance nearly everyone turned to for it was called Venetian ceruse. The recipe itself sounds almost unbelievable today, closer to alchemy than cosmetics. Thin sheets of lead were exposed to vinegar fumes inside a sealed clay container, sometimes buried in fresh horse manure for warmth. Since the gentle heat sped up the chemical reaction, left undisturbed for weeks at a time, the reaction slowly corroded the surface of the lead, producing a soft, fine white powder called white lead, or lead carbonate. That powder was then ground down further and mixed with more vinegar, and sometimes egg white for texture, into a thick, spreadable paste. Applied carefully to the face, neck, and chest, it created a smooth, opaque, almost porcelain-like white finish that completely erased freckles, scars, sun damage, and the natural variation of ordinary human skin. It looked, by the exacting standards of the era, absolutely perfect, flawless in a way real skin almost never was. One of the clearest documented victims of this obsession wasn't even Elizabeth. Her name was Isabella d'Este, a powerful noblewoman, art collector, and one of the most celebrated patrons of Renaissance Italy, married into the ruling family of Mantua. She was famous throughout her youth for her striking, widely praised beauty, painted repeatedly by some of the greatest artists of her era. Decades of heavy ceruse use changed that dramatically as she aged. In 1534, a sharp-tongued writer named Pietro Aretino, describing her in person at court, used startlingly cruel language for the time, language that nonetheless survives in the historical record. He called her smeared face, dishonestly ugly, and claimed the makeup itself made her look even worse than if she'd worn nothing at all. Isabella's transformation, from a celebrated Renaissance beauty into a woman whose own makeup routine visibly damaged her appearance in front of the entire court, became a quiet, uncomfortable warning that most of her peers chose to ignore completely, continuing the exact same routine regardless. If you're the kind of person who wants to know what beauty standards have always cost the women chasing them, hit subscribe now. We dig up stories exactly like this one every single week. Now let's return to Elizabeth. In 1562, in her late 20s, still fairly early in her long reign, she contracted smallpox. She survived the illness, but it left her face permanently marked with scars she would carry for the rest of her life. From that point forward, historical accounts describe her using Venetian ceruse extensively to hide the damage, building what historians now sometimes call her mask of youth, a carefully constructed and meticulously maintained illusion of unmarked, ageless skin that she projected in public and in official portraiture for the remaining 4 decades of her reign. For her lips, she reportedly used a red pigment called cinnabar, a mineral made from mercury sulfide, ground fine and mixed into a workable paste. When her hair began thinning noticeably, likely from the cumulative lead exposure itself among other possible factors, she started wearing elaborate wigs in public, some of which were dyed an even deeper, more vivid red using additional mercury-based compounds, layering one toxic substance on top of another. Now, it's worth pausing here, because historians today don't all agree on exactly how extensively Elizabeth personally used ceruse. Some modern scholars, including Anna Reel and Kate Maltby, have pointed out that direct historical evidence, specifically confirming Elizabeth's personal ceruse use, is thinner than popular retellings often suggest. What we do know for certain is that ceruse was overwhelmingly common among aristocratic women of her exact era, that Elizabeth's portraits show the unmistakable pale, mask-like finish associated with it, and that she suffered symptoms, including hair loss and declining health, consistent with long-term lead exposure. Whether it was the specific cause of her death remains genuinely, permanently uncertain, especially since she made sure no autopsy would ever settle the question. Here's the vicious cycle that made all of this so much worse, trapping women in a loop that only accelerated over time. Ceruse damaged the delicate skin underneath it, causing irritation, discoloration, and blemishes with continued repeated use. To remove it at the end of the day, or before reapplying, women of the era often used a cleanser made from mercury, rosewater, and crushed eggshells, scrubbed directly into the skin. That cleanser stripped away the top layer of skin entirely along with the makeup itself, leaving the face even more raw, sensitive, and visibly damaged than before. The only apparent fix available the next morning was to apply another thick layer of ceruse, hiding the fresh damage the cleanser had just caused the night before. Layer after layer, week after week, sometimes left on for a full 7 days at a stretch before being removed at all, the cycle only accelerated the underlying poisoning, with no obvious point at which a woman could simply stop without revealing exactly how much damage had already been done underneath. Elizabeth wasn't the only prominent woman whose death became associated with this substance either. The actress Kitty Fisher, one of the most talked about celebrities of 18th century London, famous for her scandalous romances and her portraits by the era's leading painters, was also rumored by contemporaries to have died from her own lead-based cosmetics routine. Across the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries combined, an unknown but likely substantial number of aristocratic women quietly suffered the exact same slow decline, hidden behind the very pale, flawless mask that was supposed to signal health, wealth, and status in the first place. Their true cause of death often recorded simply as illness, fever, or old age. It took a remarkably long time for the danger to be formally recognized. White lead wasn't officially classified as a poison in England until 1634, 31 years after Elizabeth's own death, and it continued appearing in cosmetics, in smaller and smaller amounts for centuries afterward. So here's the disturbing pattern sitting underneath this entire story. A beauty industry, whether in the 1500s or far more recently, that markets a product as safe long after internal evidence suggests real danger, simply because stopping would mean admitting fault. That pattern didn't stay in the past. In the 20th century, face powder's main ingredient shifted away from lead entirely towards something considered completely harmless by comparison. Talc, a soft, silky mineral used in everything from baby powder to pressed cosmetic compacts sold in nearly every drugstore on Earth. But talc deposits in the ground often sit extremely close to natural asbestos deposits, and if the two minerals aren't carefully separated during mining and processing, microscopic asbestos fibers can end up mixed directly into the final consumer product. Internal company testing at Johnson & Johnson, one of the world's largest talc producers for generations, reportedly detected asbestos in its own products as early as the 1970s, according to documents later revealed in court. Rather than issuing any public warning at the time, internal company memos instructed staff to halt further safety studies entirely and continue promoting the product's clean, trusted, family-friendly image instead. It would take until 2020, roughly 50 years later, for the company to finally stop selling its talc-based baby powder in the United States and Canada, following tens of thousands of lawsuits linking long-term use of the product to ovarian cancer and a rare aggressive cancer called mesothelioma. Think about the full arc of this story. A Renaissance noblewoman whose own face became a public warning in 1534, a queen who took the truth about her own death to the grave by refusing an autopsy, a cycle of damage and reapplication that trapped women for centuries, one thin layer at a time, and a 20th century company that, according to court documents, knew about a different hidden danger in its own powder for decades before finally admitting it. Next time you casually dust on a bit of setting powder or reach for a bottle of foundation, remember exactly how long women have been quietly paying a hidden price for looking flawless. If nobody ever taught you Isabella d'Este's story, imagine how many others like hers never made it into the history books at all. Subscribe if you want more of them, and tell me in the comments whether you think Elizabeth's makeup really contributed to her death. I read every single one. Next week, we're uncovering why women's asylums were quietly filled with patients who were never actually sick at all.